So Kshama, I'm asking you this question now. Which do you feel is more effective with creating change, direct action or electoral politics, and can they work together?
Thanks for asking that really important question, Sabrina. And also in your question, you said that, during the marches for Medicare for All, one of the criticisms was that a march isn't going to change anything. I mean, the idea that a march could not change anything could not be farther from the truth. And obviously, we're not talking about one march. The point is, can direct action actually bring about change? Well, throughout history, the history of social change, the history of revolutionary change shows that change comes from millions, tens of millions of ordinary people taking action in an organized and collective manner on the streets, in the workplaces, including, as Afeni said, withholding labor, working people, and especially the labor movement, labor unions, the union movement, systematically planning for and organizing strike actions and hitting the capitalist profit machine where it hits where it hurts the most. That is all extremely important. But I don't think we can settle this question by simply posing it as electoral versus direct action, because a lot of people do have illusions in terms of the Democratic Party. And in fact, actually, Trump also got elected precisely because people are just fed up with corporate politics and want something, are looking for an alternative. So in other words, for social movements, for the labor movement, for direct action to succeed, we absolutely need that to be based on a serious political analysis and a political strategy and tactics. And that has to include an overall understanding of how we can hold elected leaders and also other leaders of social movements, leaders in the labor movement, accountable to the interests, to the needs of ordinary people, the vast majority who are oppressed, the vast majority who need a shift away from this exploitative system. So just to give an example, in California, we just saw that there was a real push for winning Medicare for all. We had the California Nurses Association playing a valiant role in this effort. But what did we see just weeks ago? This Assembly Bill 1400, the bill that would have cleared a pathway for single-payer Medicare for all style healthcare in the form of CalCare, it suffered an ignominious defeat. And why is that? Because at the end of the day, the movement, and it's not that there wasn't a movement, there was a movement. The labor movement did play a really important role. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the correct political strategy, it will end in defeat very likely. And that is exactly what happened in California, which is, in other words, you can have marches on the streets, but at the end of the day, if our leaders, the leaders of social movements, end up placing their own faith in the Democratic Party and telling us that we should place our faith in the Democratic Party, that will come up in collision with the real interest that the Democratic Party represents. So what happened in California, Assembly member Ash Kalra, who is a progressive Democrat, ended up selling the movement out. Why? Because he was not willing to even bring the bill to a vote, because progressive Democrats, and we see this at the congressional level also, they absolutely refuse to put any real pressure on the corporate Democrats. And so, just being tied to a party that ultimately represents the interests of the ruling class, of the big pharma industry, of Wall Street, that strategy simply does not work. And that's what we saw playing out throughout the last 2-3 years in US Congress. It's not like progressives haven't been elected. Clearly, the election results in recent days show that ordinary people, Americans, I don't think we can just just paint just a broad brush and say all Americans suck, or because there is imperialism, ordinary Americans are party to it. No, I think we have to make a real distinction between the ruling class of the United States, which represents the imperialist interests, but the working class of America, that may be better off than the working classes of other continents, but still is being deeply exploited, and the interests of the American working class are actually tied to the interests of the working class internationally. And so it is extremely important that we understand the class differences and the class alliances that are at play here under capitalism. And if you look at US Congress, for example, as I said, it's not like progressives haven't been elected in recent years. The whole point that we have a squad in the US Congress, the fact that the progressive caucus of the Democratic Party has been playing a bigger role, All of that shows that people are hungry for a genuine left to develop. But as long as we have people putting their faith in the Democratic Party, what you have is an AOC and a Cody Bush and whoever else, the squad members refusing to actually, and let alone, Pramila Jayapal, they refusing to put the kind of pressure that they need to put on the Democratic Congress members. And then you have the squad members rejecting the force the vote tactic, which ordinary people wanted to push forward in order to bring the, in order to really sharpen the focus on Medicare for all. I don't think that any one tactic can deliver an enormous victory as Medicare for all. But the point is, how do we actually push for that kind of change? And so in reality, if you look at the small examples of how we have won, smaller compared to US Congress, but still nonetheless historic. For example, we made Seattle the first major city to win the $15 an hour minimum wage in 2014, all the way back then. At that time, the reason we won was because Socialist Alternative, the organization that I'm a part of, and the militant rank and file labor movement members, we refused to accept the logic that unfortunately many of the cautious and sort of middle-level labor leaders had, which was to not put any pressure on the local Democratic Party establishment and to not really be at odds with big business, trying to always find unity with the bosses. Well, that strategy is absolutely not going to work because the interests of the bosses under capitalism are diametrically opposed to the interests of ordinary people and working people. So the reason we won, this is the single most important lesson to draw from the $15 an hour victory in Seattle, was because we had an elected position, a socialist position through my office. This is not about me, it's about the strategy we used, was that we refused to accept that it's going to be genteel politics where I just ask the politicians privately and nicely, will you support this? No, it is about building a militant struggle which puts pressure on the Democrats out in the open and say, you are against $15 an hour, and telling working people, look, don't put your faith in these politicians. We need to build marches on the street. We need to have rallies. We need to have workplace walkouts and other strike actions built towards those strike actions in order to win what we can win. And that is what we need. And ultimately, this question also has to lead to the other important question which has come up in this discussion, which is the question of a new party for the working class. And I really agree with Afeni that it's not something that you think about, oh, it's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years. No, it's not going to happen unless we fight to make it happen. And that has to happen through really immersing ourselves in the social struggles that are coming up in this year, especially the labor struggles. This is going to be a massive year for historic labor struggles. Look at the Starbucks union drive. All of this is going to be a crucial component of building the future struggles, but it's not going to happen automatically. We do need political clarity. And so, in other words, what we need is in social movements, in the halls of power, and in the labor movement, we need rank and file led movements that are independent of the Democratic Party, and we need to elect our own leaders who understand that their loyalty is not to some power structure by the Democratic Party or somebody who calls themselves progressive, but to the ordinary people who are out there who need our help.
Wow, that was fire. That leads me to another question, and I'm going to start with you, Medea, since you just joined. How do all of you feel about the progressives that got into Congress that came from activism that still are not organizing on the outside anymore, such as Cori Bush? That's someone who came from activism, from Ferguson, from BLM. And it just seemed like once she got into Congress, going into the Democratic Party, all of a sudden the organizing on the outside stopped. So Medea, I want to get your opinion about that.
Well, in some ways, I don't put the blame on them, because that's what the power structure does to you when you get inside there. It just sucks all the life out of you and puts you into this bubble that everything is supposedly determined by what goes on in Washington, D.C. I think it's more that, what Kshama was saying about we need stronger movements on the outside that are really pushing them. It's interesting when you see that there was, I was in the steps of the Capitol when Cori Bush was doing her sit-in to try to extend the moratorium on evictions related to COVID. And there was not a mass movement. Let me tell you, I was just shocked how few people were out there. Right, Femi? It was like nobody was there. And if you don't have a big movement, how are you going to keep it going? So, and I see that in the work that I'm doing on the anti-war front, that we really don't have champions that are going to be out there with us in the way they have to be. Even somebody like Bernie Sanders, when I saw the last thing he put out about Ukraine, it didn't even talk about negotiations. And, we call for people to come out on the streets, and we don't get much of a response. Maybe it's that we're not good organizers, or that people are just overwhelmed by so many things. I know working on international issues is tough because people are much more attuned to what's going on in their daily lives. But I think the fault is more not having a strong enough movement to push people in the in the left direction once they get into Congress, that allows them to be sucked into the more mainstream politics.
Glory?
Just to clarify real quick, the question was regarding progressives in Congress still being the way they are despite coming from an activist background, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too surprising, unfortunately, considering the fact that even activists are at danger of becoming co-opted by this massive machine. Now, you have phenomenon such as the nonprofit industrial complex and other such things, where you see large activist groups that, while they may be good on one issue, they come around and all of a sudden they're pushing issues of being imperialist, essentially. You see groups like Amnesty and the like, basically pushing for Western regime change in other places. And that's only just one example. Even organizations that are typically good, like Greenpeace, for instance, they're cheerleading alongside oligarchs when it comes to enforcing agendas that promote something like deep sea mining, which I'm fervently against. So it doesn't surprise me that activists can become co-opted as well. And it doesn't surprise me that people in Congress especially can become co-opted, even despite the fact that they were once activists, because I mean, it's written into the system that they don't want powerful movements to have leaders. We have lessons of that dating back to COINTELPRO, where they say we can't allow the rise of a Black Messiah. And obviously that speaks to specifically civil rights movements and the movement for Black liberation, but we should take that to mean that it means we can't have leaders in general. I mean, you can't, as an activist, the moment that you become any sort of leader, you're a target for co-option. So it doesn't surprise me at all that happens, especially once people get into such a racist and corporatist and intelligence community powered Congress. It doesn't surprise me to see that people can still become co-opted despite having a background of activists, because yes, activists themselves can become co-opted. Look at the background of a pimp like Jesse Jackson. Look at the background of a pimp like Al Sharpton, in contrast to someone like Reverend Annie Chambers, who you never hear about, who to this day is feeding people in Baltimore, yet you never hear about her because she hasn't been co-opted, unlike some of these other figures that I just mentioned. So it really, like I said, again, it just doesn't surprise me that people who can come from an activist background can still be co-opted, because not only is it within the nature of Congress to do so, it's unfortunately something that you have to look out for while you're in activism, because the forces of co-option and corporatization and tokenization and imperialism, and especially the damn white savior complex, is so fucking high in activism that I don't want to say it's dangerous, but it's a danger to anybody in activism that pushes you away from the actual cause, that tries to rip you away from your actual conviction to something and get you to focus on more shallow things. And the moment that happens, the moment that you start focusing more on a brand, more on commodification than anything else, that's when you become co-opted. That's when you start saying shit like, oh, I'm going to promote this worthless piece of legislation instead of fighting for the people. Oh, what's that? I can be an imperialist on this issue if it means that I can maintain my standing with the right social class. So, it's, I'll just to wrap up that whole point, that's really where I stand when it comes to politicians who used to be activists, because activists can still be politicians themselves, especially. And I don't want people to forget that anybody, unfortunately, who has a conviction like that is a target to be co-opted, because that's just the way that the system moves. It moves to try and dismantle worthy causes before they can ever materialize into something big, before they can ever bring about and manifest change. So that's something that you just have to look out for. And because of that, I'm really not surprised to see that former activists can become soulless politicians.
Well said. Afeni?
I feel so bad for my good sis Cori Bush. I do. Because you know what? It's not like she's so detached from her activist roots. It's a large part of the fact that it's very hard to fight against a party that you're a part of but you don't agree with. And that's just reality. Like I honestly, like, and maybe like it's because like I've spent time with her and I just have like a personal bias. I'm gonna be very clear about that. But like I genuinely believe that Cori Bush is one of the only ones that genuinely means what the fuck she says, because she does come from the same type of background that I do. Yelling and screaming at police officers, like radical activism, not what AOC was doing, like walking around and doing like regular old canvassing. Like that's not enough. You see what I'm saying? Like, so for somebody, who comes from the same type of background as I do, like getting arrested and all that stuff, like those memories stick with you. That trauma sticks with you. And I feel like, at this point, like if the progressives in Congress, well, I don't even do the progressives in Congress, my good sis Cori Bush, only thing that I want her to do at this point is leave the Democratic Party publicly and start her own third party. That's it. Like, we don't agree. We're not friends. We don't, like, none of our policy positions are the same. Like, I would love to see my good sis just say, you know what, the same way Justin Amash stepped away from the Republican Party, like y'all niggas is wilding. I feel like she can do the same thing. Like, no, I'm not an imperialist. Because, a couple of weeks back, Cori's office did reach out to me to start, to talk about like anti-war stuff. And she was shut down by the Democratic Party.
Yep.
Okay. They told her to cut that shit out. And so everything that we were trying to organize for, we had to stop all of that, So it's not even necessarily like the effort isn't being put there by that one representative. The effort is being put there by that one representative. But at the end of the day, there's no way that unless we have a real social movement, a sustainable social movement out in the streets, that we're going to get anywhere. Like Medea said, nobody showed up to the Capitol for real. And, I do fault Cori for this, because I told them on the second day, I said, yo, y'all have that email list and that text list. I work for a nonprofit. I work for the Working Families Party at the time. Y'all can use that to turn people out. I work for a campaign right now. We used it to turn people out because we were doing mutual aid and giving out toys for Christmas. We like, if I can text my constituent base to do that, y'all can definitely text your constituent base and say, hey, come outside. Hey, come sit at the steps. Like, hey, go sit at the steps of your capital in your state if you can't make it out to DC. Like, there were so many different things that could have happened in that space that did not happen. So it's not to say that, it's not to say that we're not good organizers. I think that, Medea especially, love you, queen, like Kshama, like we are good organizers. Like there are real results that come from good organizing. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But there has to be real support and real solidarity. And from like, I feel like a large problem on the left that we have right now is that a lot of these people that have the largest platforms, I always say it, I'm gonna say it again, have the largest platforms, that have the most influence on the left, that have the closest access to some of these people, do absolutely fucking nothing to support the social movements that come outside, period.
And or they smear them with Feeny.
Yeah, and you know,
or
and
they
I say,
smear them.
yeah, or they completely smear them. And my thing is, like, I always say, like, you know what? I'm not an authoritarian. If you want to vote until you die, that's your business. But if you say that you fight for the same things that I fight for, then if you're gonna vote and I'm like, I don't want to do that, here's a more effective strategy for it. I feel like we'll get to where we're actually trying to go if we use this in tandem with whatever the hell you're doing. Then we can actually get somewhere. If you're gonna use, if there's a Medicare for All march happening, instead of using your platform, Hassan Piker, to shit on it, maybe you should tell your folks, hey, y'all, donate to these. They're happening all over the country. You know what I'm saying? I personally can't be there. I can't show up, but blah, blah, blah. Or just shut the fuck up. You can try that. Just don't shit on it at all. I don't know. Like, I really feel like, the reason why so many people hang on to voting is because it's the easiest, most accessible thing that Americans feel like they can do. Period. If you're a working class mom that's a single mother that has 3 kids, you work in a couple jobs, you probably don't even get off for voting day. So you have to take time out of your day on voting day to even go and show up to the polls. And that's what you're doing, what you feel like is your little act of resistance. Little do you know that shit is not going to change anything. But I know me personally, like, I'm going to be radically honest. Like, sometimes I look up and all of this shit is very overwhelming. It's a lot to shoulder. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to know. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot, like, thinking about, like, when we think about imperialism, when I think about U.S. bombings in other countries, I think about babies getting obliterated, disintegrated, literally. That's what I think about, because I know that's what happens. But a lot of Americans, they don't think that far into what's going on. Even right now, we see what's happening. People take whatever the fuck they see on mainstream media and they run with that. So as organizers, the best thing that we can do right now is combat that propaganda by actually getting out in the streets and talking to real people, meeting people where the fuck they're at, whether that's, going to people's jobs and talking to some, like, not every, over 80% of people are not in unions, y'all. So it can't just be union outreach that we're doing. There are a lot of workers that just, they're not in unions. So we have to do outreach in other places. So I honestly feel like, I really would love if Corey would just quit her job and come out and be an organizer, or if she decided to just go ahead and break off the Democratic Party as a whole and do the third party thing, but I think at this point we need good organizers that are dedicated to the work. And we also need to show people that it is something that not only I can do, not only Medea can do, Kshama, like not only the shaman can do, but this is something that you can do, that you can participate in. This is something that, anyone can organize. Anybody has the capacity to organize, because life in itself in this country is radicalizing, period.
Yeah. I'm curious, Kshama, I'm going to start with you and then I'm going to work my way to Josana and go around. I'm curious, this question has come our way in the past couple of days. Obviously, there's been issues with Movement for a People's Party. There's been issues with Green Party, but Green Party does have more ballot access. So we had someone like Jill Stein who was on the ballot in 48 states. And it was frustrating to me to see some of these larger networks tell people to go vote for Hillary Clinton instead of saying go vote for Jill Stein. And I'm curious, because we're coming into another election season. What if all of those candidates, people who are trying to run as progressives back into the Democratic Party, which I don't believe is going to work, why aren't we trying to take over the Green Party? Why are we taking some of these strong progressive candidates and running them through the Green Party?
I think we have to take into account where the mass of the consciousnesses of America is at, and I don't think it is so much about whether it's the Green Party or some other party. Right now the question is, can the left as a whole, can the left in the United States as a whole present a real alternative in the presidential election year that will provide a pull of attraction for just the millions, perhaps tens of millions of ordinary Americans who are completely fed up and angry at what's on offer from the Democrats and Republicans, in the context of actually the right wing making huge gains now. There's a real danger of that. can the left do that? I mean, let's be brutally honest about what's going to happen this year. And it's not just my word as a socialist that people have to take. All the pro-democratic liberal news media, all the way from CNN to the New York Times, are predicting an absolute shellacking of the Democratic Party in the upcoming midterm elections. And why is that? That's not because Americans are moving to the right. They're actually, as a whole, Americans are moving to the left. You know, if you look at the support for unions, it is stronger now, like by far, compared to the strongest by far compared to the mid 1960s. And you just had 2 years ago, you had the Black Lives Matter movement, less than 2 years ago, actually, in the middle of a pandemic, where 26 million Americans marched in multiracial working class solidarity against police brutality, against racism, against the system itself. So, that's the raw material that we have to work with. But putting our support tacitly or overtly in the Democratic Party does not work. So we need an alternative mechanism. So if you look at what the response to Bernie Sanders' campaign, especially in 2016, but also in 2020, his message of a political revolution against the billionaire class to win Medicare for all, taxing big business to fund free education, all of that had enormous support from ordinary people, especially young people, Gen Z, across racial and gender differences. And yet, we as we had predicted, as Socialist Alternative, we supported his campaign, but we had said that the Democratic establishment will absolutely not allow you to be the candidate, Bernie, because this campaign for a political revolution you cannot run that from inside a party that represents the same billionaire interests that you are running against. And so what we wanted was for him to run, when the Democratic Party pushed him aside and made corporate candidate Hillary and Hillary Clinton the first time, and of course Biden the next time, that he should run independent through the general election, and that he should use his campaign as the basis to launch a political organization, a nationwide organization that can be the beginning, sowing the seeds of what could become a new party for working people, independent of the Democratic and Republican Party establishments. But he didn't do that. And so, in other words, I don't think this is at a point where we can put our faith into the leaders or organizations that have not proven to be successful in that way, and in terms of lacking the clarity that needs to be done. And so I think what we need is a sort of a renewed discussion. And I think a great starting point will be this year, in the midst of what is going to be major labor struggles. We, as ordinary people, as people on the left, we need to put pressure on elected leaders in the Democratic Socialists of America. I'm a member of both Socialist Alternative and the DSA, but there is a dramatic difference in the way that we have run our city council office compared to the over 100 DSA elected officials. And in fact, the only one I can think of who has used this kind of fighting strategy is Byron Sigcho Lopez, who is an alderman on the Chicago City Council. He's a fellow DSA member of mine. And in reality, it's too little that we have, too rare of an example of using your elected office using a fighting strategy. And so we need to broaden and deepen that conversation. And to do that, we need forums like the one you have put together tonight, Sabrina, but we need that on a much more gigantic level. So we need, mass discussions, mass organizing discussions, organizing conferences to discuss how we can put this agenda forward. What is the responsibility of labor leaders, and putting pressure on them to do it? And just on the previous discussion, the point that was being discussed about, is it Cori Bush's fault or is it AOC's fault? I mean, yes, it is absolutely about building a movement, and it is. And I can tell you from personal experience that once you are elected as an activist on the inside and also publicly, the Democratic Party members, the elected officials, the Democratic Party machine, is completely ruthless. They will use the carrot and stick policy. So either they will want you to be co-opted and they want you to sell out, or you can stay principled but completely ineffective and marginalized and isolated. What we have done in Seattle is reject both those defeats and actually put forward a fighting strategy that has won again and again and again. We have won 4 elections now, despite the entire city's Democratic establishment being dead against us, the power of Jeff Bezos and big business against us. And yet we have won again and again, and we have won real victories. And the way we have done that is by using our elected office as an organ of the social struggle. That is what we need. So in other words, the question we should be asking is the reason, why is it that it has not succeeded, having the squad elected in Congress? Why is that not worked? Well, the question is, during the $15 an hour, when there was a real demand for that after Biden was in office and all that, why did the squad members not actually call for rallies in West Virginia and Arizona, key states where hundreds of thousands of people would have turned out because they need $15 an hour, and Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema may not need it, and they are those 2 Congress members, and as are Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. All of these are dogged lieutenants of the ruling class. We're not going to budge them by asking them nicely. What we need is our own elected representatives who will call them out in a way that has not happened in Congress. It has happened in Seattle, the way we have used our office and we have called out the Democrats. That is the reason that they hate me and our office so much, because we do not allow them to have any cover. We either win the victories, or when we do have setbacks, we will completely politically expose the Democrats for the selling out that they have done. That is the kind of, we need a recognition that capitalism is adversarial, in the sense that the interests of the ruling class come at the expense of the interests of ordinary people. And so we have to embrace the class struggle that is embedded in the nature of capitalism itself, and understand that actually it comes down to not who's talking nicely to whom, but a balance of forces, and strengthening our forces is absolutely crucial. And the way you do that is by using your office to turn out larger social movements, and that is what we are going to need to do going forward.
Well said. Josana, I know how you feel about electoral politics, Josana, but
yeah,
still
I was
want to
gonna
ask
say,
you.
Sabby, I do not have an answer for your question, nor do I actually care, not for the question and for you, of course, but like for Green, Labor, whatever party. It's sorry. I just feel like, because when I touch on the performative side, performative whole of American politics, it's still like there are people watching. I can't see how many people are watching because I am in my phone, but like there are people watching this panel right now, and I just want to tell them to like hit the streets, motherfucker. Because like I hate to get like white people as an example of that, but like in Russia, if you breathe, you killed as a citizen, as a citizen. I remember this band from Brazil. There was one person of the band for the Pussy Riot that was part of this band. They were from Brazil. They were arrested because they were speaking against the government, and they were queer women. And like just by existing, they were a problem. They were threatened. Their lives were threatened, and they were there. And right now in Russia, you have a bunch of people in the streets protesting the war. I don't probably agree with their reasons. I wouldn't be protesting on their side. But what I'm saying is like, how many countries is the USA bombing just right now? Just on Thursday, the USA bombed Somalia. Do y'all know that? No, you don't. Because Somalia is a country in Africa. It's a majority Black country. And people are here like sitting and discussing electoral politics. Like seriously, in a country that doesn't even have anti-corruption laws. How can electoral politics, how can a party exist and work if there is not even freaking anti-corruption laws? You asked before why people are co-opted. Because of that. Because there are no limits. They can go have tea with Jeff Bezos, get their money in their pocket, and do whatever they do, sell their souls. The culture of the money, the culture of making it, the imperialistic culture of dominating and being the leader. And I freaking hate when I hear we need the leaders. Do we really need the leaders? Do we really have the need for a hero? for a manager. Do we? We, the people, hold the power. And I don't know what part of that equation that we are not understanding. Maybe, and only maybe, my English is not so good. And that's on me. That's on me. I have not good English. But like, seriously, we do not need the leaders. We hold the power. 40% of our taxes are the bombs that fell on Somalia just on Thursday. So like, if this moment right now, and also inflation is through the roof, and every day in the US just right now in the present moment, I feel like it's the Brazil that I grew up in. The economy is breaking. Brace yourselves, American, because you don't know that struggle. You Americans from the present moment do not know that struggle. It's gonna be like 1929. The economy is gonna break in that level. And maybe then people that are starving are gonna find strength to fight. But like, we're gonna get to 40 million people living in the streets. We have a lot of people already. We're gonna start seeing homeless children. Because if the bombs that this country is throwing in other countries are not sufficient, we're gonna start seeing in our home. And I have the hopes that that's gonna take us to the streets. So like, when you ask me about the Green Party, I don't have an answer for that, because for me, I want to end. I want to end that. I want to end that. I want chaos because America needs the chaos right now so we can rebuild. Without the destruction, there's no construction. So I don't care. I really don't. I'm looking for solutions to make people listen to the fact that we should be right now bringing chaos, bringing destruction. And that's what the world want to see. Because when you in America fight to destruct this system the way it is, you are fighting for the world. You are fighting for the rest of the 6 billion something people that are depending on your strength. But voting, you were cheating on them. Hard, ugly, sad. So yeah, I don't, and activists that become politicians, and this is a job. Like, that's why I said in the beginning, I cannot, like, I'm an activist because I became, no, I am an existence, and my existence is an act of resistance. So there's no name, there's no profession for that. Is my existence being an act of resistance? And I don't understand. I really don't understand. Where is that fire? Where is it missing for the people in the United States of America? Because, like, let me tell you something about myself. I hold a green card. The level of danger that I face, because I have been an undocumented immigrant for 5 years. I couldn't go back to my country. I couldn't see my family. My mom just passed away. I spent 5 years without being with her. And even though these are very expensive in that sense, things, holding my green card and my free, quote unquote freedom, because I can only leave this country if I hold citizenship. Even with that level of danger, because somebody can just see this video and be like, oh, this bitch is a leftist, this bitch is whatever, we deporting her. I cannot even get arrested because I shoplift. If I, this one unity person here, can be here saying those things, can be ready to go to the street, can be planning to go to, in that level of danger in my own life, why? I do not understand why the American people cannot. Why? And I'm going to throw a question for the panel. Why are y'all discussing these games? Why are y'all playing chess when the necessity in the present moment is for us to be fighting with our hands, rocks, flip-flops whatever we have, whatever is strength we have, our whatever. Why are we not doing that? So I'm just the crazy lady from the panel that's like desperate to see some action. And I'm sorry, I have people that I support, they will be candidates, but I don't. For this moment, this is not the solution at all, at freaking all. I'm sorry, Sabby. I got a little
Oh, no,
emotional.
it's okay.